trust defines your strategy. What does it take to drive meaningful change within an organization? Some leaders naively believe that good intentions alone can reshape company culture, but success often depends on one make or break factor: trust. Trust is the currency that funds change. With ample reserves of goodwill, leaders can drive change through authority rather than painstaking coalition building. In environments plagued by cynicism and doubt, even the most brilliantly designed efforts fizzle out. So how can leaders or other proponents of DEI gauge the level of trust? The presence or absence of skepticism is an indicator. In high-trust organizations, employees rarely question leadership's decisions. When bumps in the road occur, they extend patience, believing that leaders have their best interests in mind. Medium-trust environments show more uncertainty. Employees actively challenge the official narrative, scrutinizing missteps. In low-trust workplaces, mistrust and bitterness reign supreme. Employees assume leaders will fail to achieve espoused goals. They view DEI commitments as performative and participating in them as risky. Let's look at how DEI approaches differ according to each level of trust. In high-trust companies, where formal authority translates to real influence, the path forward is relatively linear. First, leaders can prime the organization by clearly setting expectations. They must ensure that executives and managers are prepared to legitimize and vocally back DEI efforts. Managers should be reminded to give thoughtful feedback and help steward their teams through discomfort. And HR and operations leads should be encouraged to collaborate with grassroots groups if needed. Next, leaders assess the current state of DEI within the organization. This involves a period in which quantitative and qualitative data is gathered to understand the company's strengths and shortcomings. For example, linking promotion rate data to demographics may reveal disparities. Meanwhile, qualitative data from in-depth interviews gives the human context behind statistics. If, for instance, survey data suggests that biased evaluations may be disadvantaging certain groups, in-depth conversations could reveal how this is occurring. Leaders then need to distill the data into a compelling rationale for change aligned with company values. One way could be to explain that the company previously prioritized rapid expansion and profitability over employee well-being, sacrifices needed to survive initially. But now that the company is established, it can broaden its focus, balancing growth with investments in employee health, fulfillment, and inclusion. This type of narrative can help employees understand the evolving priorities and rally them around a vision for a more humane culture. Next, leaders and stakeholders should iterate experiments, guided by patient feedback. For instance, they might implement evaluation rubrics and structured interviews to standardize the early stages of hiring. Or they could use bonuses to incentivize managers to meet diversity goals. Even something small, like taking steps to equalize office housework, can build momentum for broader change later. As solutions are tested, proponents must celebrate successes without becoming complacent. They can tout measurable progress, emphasize outcomes over intentions, and continually reiterate the long-term DEI goals. Each achievement renews reserves of trust, enabling progressively greater and greater ambition. With time and care, leaders can leverage the goodwill they've earned to methodically enhance equity within the organization. But what if the leaders of the organization inherit a more skeptical audience? In this case, top-down efforts may face heavy resistance, and the playbook followed by high-trust organizations may fall flat. Leaders must take conscious action to secure buy-in and show they have skin in the game through concrete commitments. A strong statement might, for example, promise specific outcomes like pay parity within a set timeline, with leaders' bonuses on the line for results. Goals backed by clear accountability help to build trust, whereas vague vision statements only invite further doubt. In medium trust environments, small wins are critical. Achieving narrow, bite-sized goals steadily rebuilds depleted trust reserves to motivate greater change. Compounding small wins ultimately earns enough confidence and buy-in to overhaul the system. Leaders can also help create or prime new accountability groups like DEI councils. Comprised of employees of diverse backgrounds, these groups wield grassroots legitimacy and influence. Their involvement lends credibility to leadership initiatives otherwise met with skepticism. Together, councils and leaders can coordinate two distinct halves of the movement for change, balancing legitimacy and authority to drive pragmatic change. But what about a truly low-trust environment? A workplace where reservoirs of trust run bone dry and where skepticism has fallen into corrosive cynicism. In these environments, stakeholders doubt everything and everyone. They see self-preservation as the only rational approach, and any solution relying on collective trust is dismissed off the bat. With troops unwilling to follow marching orders, transformation needs to originate outside formal authority structures. For this to happen, leaders have to cede power to disadvantaged groups, enabling bottom-up change. Rather than resisting grassroots movements, executives should empower them, apologizing for past harms, allowing demands to shape priorities, and redistributing decision-making influence. Though counterintuitive, elevating stakeholders is the only path to redemption. Employees can sense when goals are about checking boxes, not reform. So defying their cynical expectations and taking action can really help leaders shift the mood. Progress depends on steadily empowering employees until their cynicism softens into manageable skepticism. True, lasting success requires leaders to acknowledge their mistakes and hand over control with integrity. Building a foundation. In recent years, there's been growing scrutiny of performative DEI initiatives that bring little tangible change. How, then, can companies build diversity, equity, and inclusion into their DNA? First, it's important to recognize that simply implementing common best practices without first getting a clear picture of your specific organization is a recipe for failure. There are no shortcuts to DEI work. Invest time in deeply analyzing the unique diversity, equity, and inclusion challenges your organization faces. And get clear on the root causes driving any lack of representation, gaps in equity, or problems with inclusion. Then, and only then, should you consider applying conventional solutions, carefully selecting approaches that target the particular problems you've uncovered. With that said, let's look at a few different ways you can begin to integrate DEI measures. The first steps are about creating a strong foundation that aligns vision, accountability, transparency, and structure. Leaders should develop a clear vision for DEI that complements the organization's unique mission and strengths in terms of its operations, culture, and strategy. For instance, a company known for teamwork could frame DEI as enabling cooperative success. To embed the vision, identify factors that have driven past business wins, and then activate those to achieve your DEI goal. With this vision in place as your North Star, the next pillar is accountability. Too often, leaders announce ambitious DEI goals without real accountability structures. As mentioned earlier, organizations can build in accountability by tying executive compensation and bonuses to measurable representation in hiring and promotions. This creates tangible costs and rewards based on actual diversity gains rather than virtue signaling. Next is transparency. Many companies share limited demographic data, but true transparency requires more. Data on compensation, retention, inclusion surveys, promotion rates, and discrimination complaints across demographics should be reported to stakeholders. Rather than only touting successes, organizations can build trust by also sharing stories of failure, missteps, and lessons learned. Finally, DEI commitments should be codified into every part of an organization's structure. This starts with ensuring expertise is present on the executive team, whether through a chief diversity officer or trusted advisor. The responsibility for driving DEI outcomes should be reproduced at every level, including recruitment, product development, and communications. While the board provides oversight from the top, internal councils and committees can drive change throughout the org chart. With vision, expertise, and accountability from different perspectives woven throughout operations, DEI can become embedded and resilient to changes in personnel. While building this foundation may seem daunting, organizations can start with what's already working. So ask yourself, where is your company already effective at driving change? Step by step by step. Once an organization has built a foundation for its DEI initiatives, what's next? Well, successful DEI requires carefully and intentionally designing recruitment, hiring, advancement, feedback, conflict resolution, and employee well-being initiatives. Let's briefly go through each one. When bringing in new talent, aim for authenticity over aspirational marketing. Candidates may be skeptical of highly sanitized recruiting campaigns and suspect the real culture is less inclusive than portrayed. Some research even shows that prominent DEI messaging paradoxically decreases diversity in new hires. Why? Non-white candidates who see the emphasis on equity voluntarily disclose their race, then face more discrimination and get hired less. So default to transparency and an honest portrayal of the actual culture, warts and all. Next, don't treat diverse candidates as commodities to be extracted from a given community. Instead, consider engaging with those communities to provide real value. Once you've earned trust, your outreach efforts will readily yield interested, qualified candidates. Simultaneously, beware of network effects that can quickly amplify a lack of diversity. If current employees' networks skew toward heavily male, white, or elite university grads, for example, reliance on those networks for referrals will only replicate this homogeneity. Standardize and formalize hiring processes to interrupt bias and ensure fairness. When hiring managers use inconsistent, ad hoc methods, it invites bias to creep in and hijack decisions. Require structured interviews, standardized rubrics for candidate evaluations, and formal discussion and justification of decisions. Set diversity targets for candidate pools at every stage, benchmarked against the available talent. Handle candidate diversity with care, not blind anonymization. Removing names, photos, and other identity cues from resumes aims to reduce bias, but these measures can easily backfire. Supposedly neutral factors like unemployment gaps may penalize diverse candidates more when identity details have been stripped away. Organizations that value diversity often damage that very diversity when they scrub away identifying information. A better method is to train hiring managers to address identity more thoughtfully. Quality DEI hiring takes time and resources. Rushed, haphazard processes invariably fail to yield diversity. If managers face the ultimatum to fill a role in 1 week, they're unlikely to succeed. Instead, give staff the time, training, and resources to build rigor, accountability, and care into their recruiting and hiring. What happens once diverse employees are through the door? At this point, it's about equitable advancement. High-value stretch assignments, ones that let people demonstrate skills, are key to promotion. On the other hand, undesirable office housework, like taking notes in meetings, is important but rarely leads to advancement. If this kind of work isn't formally assigned, it often follows demographic patterns, so be sure to clearly define responsibilities instead. Similarly, it's important to demystify promotion processes through transparency. Publicize job-leveling matrices, promotability expectations, and typical career ladders. Train managers to regularly discuss advancement with their reports. An opt-out model where employees are automatically put into consideration for promotion after a certain tenure can also help. Even with formal processes, bias can still get in the way of advancement. Justify promotion decisions by adhering to leveling matrices. Train decision-makers on avoiding bias and remove subjective criteria like has potential. Proactive sponsorship and mentorship of promising employees from underrepresented groups can also accelerate change. Effective feedback practices help to enable learning and continual improvement. Build a culture that frames feedback as constructive, not punitive, and offer training to normalize it. Collect input through regular surveys, anonymous suggestion boxes, and lightweight formal reviews for shorter cycles. Ensure managers give consistent developmental guidance tailored to each report's needs and identity. Leaders should model openness to tough feedback by seeking it out, not just tolerating it. This builds psychological safety for difficult conversations throughout the organization. But what happens if conflict or harm occurs? It's important to prioritize accountability as well as employee safety. Try using anonymous reporting channels to make it easier for employees to speak up and frame disputes as opportunities for learning. Remove zero-tolerance policies in favor of rehabilitative discipline that enables redemption after mistakes. Ultimately, you want to ensure that any challenges raised lead to changed outcomes. Flexible work arrangements can also enhance employee well-being. Support flex time, job sharing, compressed work weeks, and remote or hybrid options. Celebrate teams that succeed with flexibility to counteract stigmas. Disincentivize overwork and constant connectivity with quiet hours and celebrations of personal life achievements. Model healthy boundaries at the leadership level. If leaders constantly work nights and weekends, there's no way your well-being initiatives will succeed. Expand and customize benefits to serve a truly diverse workforce. Offer mental health support, inclusive health care, floating holidays, and facilities that accommodate disabilities. Meeting needs involves going beyond one-size-fits-all perks. Enable case-by-case flexibility, then codify accommodations that become prevalent. Healthy DEI practices require intention, investment, and rigor in the design of both formal and informal processes. With care, organizations can build cultures where employees of all backgrounds are engaged, empowered, and enabled to do their best work. The reward is a workplace where diversity is leveraged for innovation and productivity, with equity and inclusion knitting workers together into a thriving community.